Thanks, everybody. It's wonderful to be with you. It's wonderful to be with an audience in person. How about that? Yeah? And it's wonderful to be with a very large live stream audience. If you're joining us from around the world, welcome to the 2022 Planet Forward Summit, the Storyteller's Journey, Navigating Crisis, Seeking Solutions, from the George Washington University Jack Morton Auditorium. Folks, I won't mince words. We are in peril. The UN Secretary General says climate change is a code red for the planet. The IPCC scientists say humanity has, their words, a brief and rapidly closing window to act. The climate crisis is complicated by so many other crises that we know so well. Russia and Ukraine, politics and polarization, division and disinformation. But there are incredible efforts underway. Research, inventions, innovations, progress. And those are stories that we have to tell as well to inform and to give hope. Planet Forward is a multimedia platform for students from all across the country and around the world to publish stories that explore some of these inventions and innovations and the problems with the idea of solutions to move the planet forward. I want to show you just a few of the stories that made our finalists this year from our StoryFest competition. A couple of them you'll see behind me, A Tale of Two Mountains, Battling Climate Change and Wildfires at Home and Abroad from Ryan Bieber, Ithaca College, StoryFest finalist. Coastal Degradation, Through Fresh Eyes, a picture book come to life, Delaney Graham, SUNY ESF. Eternity is Upstream, a call for salmon habitat protection, Claire Bobbitt Ryan from Middlebury College. College Food Insecurity, Eating Away at Student Success from Connor Kurbis, University of Wisconsin-Madison. How Trees Can Save a Drowning Desert by Farzona Kamnas, George Washington University. Should you be taking pictures of roadkill? Citizen Science AIDS Research Efforts, Clarice Kennelly, SUNY Plattsburgh, State University of New York, Plattsburgh. These are just some of the stories. We got hundreds of them over this last year from students from all over the world, literally, on all sorts of subjects. So today, we're going to navigate some of these crises, but we're also going to hear about solutions. And we'll hear from storytellers who will tell us how they do it and how we can be more effective as communicators. Why? Because through stories, we inform, we educate, we engage, we organize, we mobilize, we understand, and we empathize. We're devoting this event today to a dear friend of ours, Tom Lovejoy. The godfather of biodiversity was the title that he earned. His commitment to science, conservation, and the protection of the Amazon rainforest were astonishing. He passed away in December. He was a member of the Planet Forward Advisory Council, a great friend, took a trip of students and Planet Forwarders to the Brazilian rainforest, Camp 41, and I'll have more in a few minutes about that. But Tom, we dedicate this day and this mission to you. If you didn't have an opportunity to know Tom, trust me, he was a giant, not a giant in his stature, but a giant in his stature. I want to thank a few very important people and our sponsors, our media and partners who've helped to make this possible, incredible partners, our lead corporate and foundation partners, thanks to you, couldn't do it without you, our pillar schools who have invested in this project, and our esteemed supporters and partners from other walks of life. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I want to shout out our amazing staff because we surely couldn't do it with them. Kim Osi, Victoria Middleton, Lisa Palmer, Sophie Collar, Pit Balshaw, Jennifer Kuyich. Thank you all so much for all the work you've done, because can I tell you what, folks? We wouldn't be here today if it weren't for them. Thanks too to our production team in the back, what you'll see, the magic they make, and how we share this with our live stream audience, I think will be very special. I should tell you we have more than 80 campuses, colleges and universities that are represented in the gatherings here today in this room and across our live stream audience. So welcome to you all from around the world. And I'm proud to tell you today that this institution is walking the walk, okay? We are establishing a Sustainability Institute. The purpose of the Sustainability Institute, and we'll talk some more about that shortly, will be to leverage our teaching, our research, our convening like this, our science, our research, our communication to bring stakeholders together. And the Institute has just launched an institute, a new Learning, Research, and Action Fellowship. And we have the first cohort of our fellows, 13 of them, for the 2022-23 academic year. So welcome to you all, and off we go. It is now a great privilege and pleasure to introduce someone to you who is leading this institution at this time, the president of the George Washington University, Mark Wrighton. Before coming to GW, he served as the chancellor at Washington University in St. Louis. Before that, he was at MIT, professor of chemistry, provost there. This is a big institution in this city. We have an outsized opportunity to influence the research, the policy, the opinion, the public, the planet. So we like to say at GW, we really do want to move the planet forward. Would you join me, please, in welcoming President Mark Wrighton?
Thank you very much, Frank. And Frank Sesno is the originator and leader of this important Planet Forward Summit, and I'd like to thank him for his leadership. Please join me in thanking Frank. I've been here a little over 3 months, and I can tell you that George Washington University is with it. Just as Frank has mentioned, we are committed to building a better world. I'm so pleased that many students and others are here in person, and I'm grateful that hundreds of people are joining us online. I want to thank all of you for your dedication to the future of this planet. This year has shown us the dimensions of the challenges we face: extreme weather events, record heat, floods, and drought. These, among other signals, are urgent warnings that we must act using all the science, innovation, imagination, and creativity that we can muster. I'm a chemist, as you just heard, and I know that advances in chemistry, at least in part, are a consequence of creative, good work by well-intentioned scientists. But perhaps you also appreciate that a fundamental chemical reaction, namely the combustion of fossil fuels, is responsible for enormous adverse consequence for our planet. As a chemist, I am proactive in helping people to understand what we as chemists might be able to do to avoid climate change. I myself have been involved in electrochemistry, surface chemistry, and photochemistry, all related to the development of renewable energy technologies. Through the research and teaching here and in programs like our education focused on sustainability and other academic programs, I believe we can make a difference in the future. And that's what this summit is all about. I know that many people are involved in addressing the challenges that we face. There are major global challenges, and as a scientist, I know that research can make options available for us. But the implementation of options that we come up with may well be ignored or difficult, and without creative and dedicated effort on the part of social scientists, political leaders, and the community at large, we're not going to realize the benefits of research. I'm very confident that we as scientists and engineers will come up with good solutions. They need to be economically viable and certainly scalable to address the global challenges that we face. Within these many areas, I'm proud of the important role Planet Forward will play in promoting compelling, creative, fact-based storytelling. This summit will focus on stories of food and water, biodiversity, energy, equity, and our built environment. I hope you will be inspired by them, and I hope you will take back new ideas and techniques about how to tell these stories yourself so that you can raise your voice and have even more impact than beyond this summit. Obviously, this is a very challenging time. I view climate change as the challenge of this century. I'm probably not going to be around for the remainder of this century, but we're preparing students who will be important in solving these problems. And I thank you for your commitment. Let's move the planet forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, President Wright. And I want to do one other shout out. I understand Paul Walbeck is in the room. Dean Walbeck, where are you? Over there. Dean Walbeck is the Dean of the Columbian College of Arts and Sciences. We're part of that. And CCAS has been so supportive of this project and bringing the different disciplines together to solve these problems, address them. So as we think about crisis, we can be struck, I think, safely by two things: how much crisis there is on the planet, and how some really rise to the occasion. Celebrity chef and humanitarian José Andrés is one of these people. I hope those of you who are watching and those of you who are in the room are aware of what he's been doing. He deploys around the world. His World Central Kitchen answers a call. Most recently, as we speak, in Poland, working with refugees from Ukraine. And he teaches here, right? A class called World on a Plate. He's also a master storyteller. He helps people understand and empathize through their stories. Just before he went to Poland, he sat down with the director of GW's sustainability minor, biologist, an amazing person, Dr. Tara Scully, and I'd like to let you eavesdrop on the conversation they had.
This year's Planet Forward Summit is all about the storyteller's journey, and it's highlighting the crises that we face around the world, but also trying to highlight the solutions as well, and a path forward. So I wanted to start asking you about the crises that you face and the work that you do with World's Central Kitchen. So your work involves a lot around the intersectionality of sustainability issues like climate change and equity. How do you choose where to go and why, and what's important about the location or events when you're considering, attending to the crisis?
Well, what Central Kitchen we tried to do was how we transform the problem into an opportunity. When we had farmers throwing food out in the fields because all of a sudden markets or restaurants were not buying their product. At the same time, we saw long lines in the food banks of America. At the same time, we saw restaurants shutting down and laying off employees. So if we had to feed people, and at the same time, we had to keep the system working, what if we don't put those restaurants up and running, not anymore as for-profit restaurants, but restaurants that became community kitchens? Why if those restaurants, by injecting a little bit of money through them, they're the same restaurants that they can keep paying rent, paying the lights, more important, paying the employees, and in the process making meals that different organizations in need, elderly homes, hospitals, homeless, first responders. This is what we saw in this pandemic, that we had to think out of the box, not with a great idea that only Einstein could come up with, but a very simple idea using the resources that we had at our fingertips. That's what we did. We create kind of a 360-degree solution where everybody was important in the solution. That's very much how we went through this pandemic, trying to make problems into opportunities to create better systems.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of what we talked about in our class, World on a Plate, the supply chain issue. And what you have achieved is looking at the entire supply chain and trying to pay attention to every person in the supply chain. And that, I think, is the reason why your approach is so successful.
This kind of situation we have, that in the richest country in the history of mankind, we have a huge population that is food insecure. When we have a population that is food insecure, means that those people are not able to be part of the society and helping create a better and a stronger economy.
So it reminds me of recently I read an article on your friend Andrew Zimmern, who was appointed as a Goodwill Ambassador for the UN World Food Program. And his quote, which kind of just struck me, what you were just saying about innovation and you know, our country and how wealthy it is, and yet we still have food insecurity. So his quote was, "It's mind-boggling that there is an issue that is killing people, harming our global culture, and resulting in an ongoing catastrophe, one that we actually also have the skill to solve, but clearly we don't have the political will to actually execute." And it just struck me as soon as I read that, I thought of you immediately, because it's the same echo I hear from you about these issues. It's got to be up to the policymakers to make that change and implement the solutions. It's not rocket science.
Many of the issues we really face, not only in America, we saw in this pandemic, but across the world, begins and ends with access to food in an affordable way. When we solve this conundrum with the right political will, we will fight hunger and the world will be really a better place.
Thinking of how you built the World Central Kitchen from the ground up, I bet it was a really empowering experience, but it was probably also very daunting at the same time. Could you talk about how your programs have changed over time and what you see the future to be for World Central Kitchen? What's on the horizon?
We're not an organization that brings a lot of hardware, meaning assets that we own. We are an organization that believes in software, more brain and more heart, empathy and smarts. And we go to a place and we maximize as much as we can whatever is available to us. Who can give us or rent us a kitchen? What restaurants or food trucks can join us? Who may have a ship if we need to feed multiple islands? Who may have helicopters if we... Fundamentally, the only thing we've changed is that now, whatever mission it is, we're thinking big enough. 3 billion people on planet Earth are still cooking with fossil fuels. This is a clear and present danger to try to combat climate change. But more important, families are poorer because they use more wood than they need. Deforestation is creating a lot of mayhem in tropical areas. Women are unhealthy because they smoke, they inhale. All of a sudden, clean cooking is at the heart of moving 3 billion people from semi-food insecurity and poverty, many of them highly food insecure and very poor, into hope by not throwing money into smoke in the air, but making sure that that money stays in their family, in their communities, invested in better health, in better education, in better food.
I wanted to ask you, because a lot of things right now are so divided and negative, is how you cut through that negativity and get your story to people with that positive outcome, with that, even though you're often talking about some really challenging situations, you always have, you know, this bright light at the end.
We need to understand that there is not perfect solution to every single problem in a planet that is highly complicated, with people with many backgrounds, different faith, different ways of seeing things. Creating is the most difficult of arts, Bringing people together is the most difficult of things to do in life. That's why it's so important that nobody should follow a leader that is a leader of destruction, is a leader of breaking things and people apart, that is only telling you that the only way they have of lead is by finger pointing to the bad things that the other side, versus what are you going to create to create that better world you're claiming. That's why it's so essential that young people lead the way in making sure that political parties don't use us as their peons to do whatever they want. But we understand and we make them understand that they are here to service us, from private sector to government to other places in the world. They will shape a better world by putting food more in the center and making sure that, again, food stops being the problem and becomes once and for all the solution. Planet forward, planet food forward, we should call it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the time that you've taken to spend with us and talk about Planet Forward and our summit this semester. We're really excited. Again, I'm excited about next semester and our World on a Plate class.
Well, thank you, Tara, because every day you make me smarter. So I appreciate and I love to have this class at George Washington with you.
Tara, come on up. So Tara Scully, as you saw, just engaged Jose, as she does in class all the time, and he kind of goes 100 miles an hour. I think the thing that he talked about that's important here is this sort of trying to convey positivity amid all the crisis. You're a biologist. You're a scientist.
Yes.
I mean, you weren't trained to be a storyteller. Why does this matter to you?
It matters to me because of something a colleague said to me recently, Provost Chris Bracey, actually. He said to me, and I have it on a sticker on my computer, there's always the truth, but then there's the story. And as a scientist, we've been sitting at our lab benches and publishing papers thinking that the truth would get out there, but it's not. And I think that it's really, really important that we start engaging in storytelling. And I know a lot of my colleagues here at GW are trying to do that as well.
It's a big thing with scientists, right? Trying to communicate science. Have you heard from Jose since he's been in Ukraine or anybody around him? Following his tweets and things?
Following his tweets and things, and I'm really worried about him. He's, going into the battlefield, and I'm very proud of him as a friend. He's just such an amazing person and inspirational. But he believes, I think one quote that I remember from him as well is that very early on in his career, he realized the power of food. I mean, look at the power of food. It can, destroy a political system. But it also can evoke memories and take you and transport you to different places and times. And I think right now in Ukraine, that's what's important. He's helping those people in the middle of this war, just trying to take a moment and not feel like they're in the middle of a war.
Tara, thank you very, very much. Really enjoyed that in your class. We should all audit the class.
Yes,
I think
please.
something Tara said is
Register
very
for the
important.
class.
Being there, the way he's using his social media, this is powerful storytelling. You all know that. We can do good as well with our social media. We've had a lot of students who've done food stories this past year. Planet Forward had a partnership with FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, for Planet FAO Fellows. Here are a few of some of the stories they did. The Big New Ag, what regenerative agriculture can learn from conventional farming. Benjamin Thomas from Franklin and Marshall College did that one. COVID prompted local communities to creatively combat food insecurity. Our structural solutions next. Sajal Govindaro from GW here. Indigenous Peoples Liaison set her sights on youth, food security, and the land. Terius Harris, University of Oklahoma, was our fellow doing that one. Sustainability is the goal. Here's what young farmers need to get there. That was done by Jules Struck from Emerson College. So it's been a real privilege to work with FAO. Food is a huge issue. How many in the room are concerned about food security, sustainable agriculture? You want to eat healthy. Like, we're all food consumers. It's been a privilege, as I said. Here's Jocelyn Brown Hall. She's director of FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization in North America. Take a look.
So we have a situation right now where we have more conflict all over the world. We have conflict in Somalia. We have conflict in Sudan. We have conflict in Ethiopia. We have conflict in Afghanistan. Now we have conflict in Ukraine. And you would not believe how little there is of a discussion about agriculture, seeds, livestock, people getting those seeds and livestock, being able to plant them on their own and be self-sufficient in that area. And you hear a lot about security or peace forces or health or COVID or vaccines. You don't talk about the basics of agriculture, which has to be at the center of any resilience program for people who are in the middle of these difficult periods of food insecurity. If you eat it, if you breathe it, if you drink it, if you wear it, it has to do with agriculture. And I really want people to understand that agriculture touches every single solitary aspect of a person's life 24/7. People think of it really as, oh, just a seed and a hoe and back-breaking work in the sun. And that's not what agriculture is. And that's why I think it's so important for us to get the story out through Planet Forward. The stories that the Planet Forward Fellows produced this year were incredibly inspiring and imaginative and impressive. And it was an honor to be able to listen to them. I was impressed by how diverse they were, whether it was about indigenous people's food systems, regenerative food systems. Just shows everyone how diverse agriculture is, that this is not your grandparents' agriculture anymore, that agriculture can be hip and cool and bring us all kinds of dietary differences. And I certainly know that the diet that I eat now is incredibly different from 40 years ago, and that has a lot to do with our global connections, and youth need to be part of that. I also want to strongly encourage everyone to check out the rest of the stories on the recipes for food security on Planet Forward's website, because you will be inspired also.
So many thanks to FAO, and for those of you in the room, for those of you joining us, I'll have some more a bit later on what we'll be doing with them in the future and opportunities for you all. The way we tell food stories most effectively is to get personal, to find a character, to find someone that we can relate to, whether it's a mom or a child or a refugee or a farmer or a food producer, someone who's trying to live in a more healthy way, and to let them tell their story in their own words and to let them bring that story to life, so that this is not about numbers and statistics, but it's about people and human beings. That's how we relate. That's part of the power of story. So that's what I want you to think about when you go forward, and how you communicate personally, professionally, in whatever realm you're in. We're talking about navigating crisis and seeking solutions. Another crisis in the story that has to be told is the biodiversity crisis, right? We talk about that a lot. Some of the work that Professor Scully does here is oyster and oyster restorations, endangered, not an endangered species necessarily, but they're certainly endangered populations in places. We may be in the midst of the 6th extinction. How many in the room have heard of the 6th extinction? Okay. This is prompted by human development. It's prompted by climate change. The Brazilian rainforest may be on the verge of, or past, a series of tipping points. As I mentioned earlier, we're dedicating our gathering today, and so much more, to our friend Tom Lovejoy. For those of you who didn't know Tom, and many of us had the privilege of knowing him, he spent more than 50 years, here you see him in his Camp 41, more than 50 years researching, working, and advocating to protect the rainforest, and he succeeded to a very large extent. He led an extraordinary Planet Forward storytelling expedition to his research station, Camp 41, a few years ago. He's taken all kinds of people there to see and to relay what they've learned. He's brought scientists, movie stars, politicians, journalists, students, so they can tell the story. Like grad filmmaking student Jamie Dittmar, who traveled with us. I'm going to show you her video here to Tom Lovejoy, starring Tom Lovejoy, starring his rainforest, followed by some others who were with us and were deeply affected, and some of them who are in this room with us today. Here's Jamie's piece from Camp 41 with Tom.
How do we actually protect the biology of the living planet so that it's there hundreds and thousands of years from now? Let's stop thinking about nature as some little patch of protected area in the middle of a human-dominated system. let's start thinking about human aspiration embedded in natural landscapes. So we're at Camp 41, which is, to my mind, the best of the research camps we have here in the heart of the Amazon. And that's because it's virtually unbroken forest from here all the way to the Guianas, essentially the forest primeval. Biological diversity is the priority in how I look at the whole picture. It's incontrovertibly led to a priority in protecting large areas and connecting small areas that are now isolated. And just to sum it up with a single example from this project, 100 hectares of forest. If it's a fragment, it loses half of the species of the birds of the forest in less than 15 years. So you may have a forest, but it doesn't have all the things that it had originally. So what this means is if you want to have all that diversity in the Amazon basin, you actually need to manage it as a system so that it can generate the rainfall that's essential to have a rainforest. Moisture gets returned to the moving air mass through evaporation of the complex surfaces of the forest and through the action of transpiration through the leaves. That process repeats itself 5 or 6 times until finally it gets to the high wall of the Andes and the air mass moves up and most of that moisture drops out in a tremendous amount of rain and creates essentially the 20% of the world's river water that is the Amazon system. But it's not just about science here, it's also about building the next generation of scientists. There is no better classroom than the reality of being in the heart of the living planet, and they get it.
When I think of Tom Lovejoy, I think of someone who was so willing and passionate to share his life's work. I remember we would go on these 2-hour long walks through the Amazon at Camp 41, and every once in a while we'd stop and we'd look at different plants, or we'd see the monkeys jumping around in the trees, or we'd see a project that he was working on. And just his patience and willingness to share all of his knowledge was something that I really admired, and you could really tell that he was passionate about sharing what he knew.
Hi, my name is Tomek Falkowski. I am now an assistant professor in the Department of Forestry at New Mexico Highlands University. And going to Camp 41 was an experience that allowed me to have this visceral understanding of biodiversity at a scale that I had never experienced before. I mean, we're talking about one of the most biodiverse places in the world, being the Amazon rainforest.
Hello, my name is Harrison Watson. I am a third-year PhD candidate in ecology and evolutionary biology at Princeton University. And in reflecting on my many experiences with Tom and my exceptional experience at Camp 41, I think that among the many other things that trip did for me, the experience and the exposure that I had to the one-of-a-kind community or series of communities that, call Camp 41 home has really set me or really set me on the path towards a career in academia, though it's still very early on, obviously. And I have a lot to thank for Tom in that regard.
So Tom was a scientist, he was an advocate, and he was a storyteller. And he could explain science in ways that we could understand. And you take that, and as you saw with Jamie's piece, put these pictures to it, put this video to it, bring in music, show us what we're talking about. Don't just tell us, show us. And that's very powerful. And that's what Tom did, it's what Jamie did, and it's something to think about. How do you show people, not just tell people what you care about, what you're thinking about, what you're talking about, the story? I think the biggest word in biodiversity, what's the biggest part of the word in biodiversity? Diversity. Who said that? Diversity. And that's true in the biological world. It's also true in the human world, isn't it? And it's vital to the narratives that we tell, to the crises that we need to navigate, and the solutions we need to seek, and the stories we must try to tell, to have that diversity, to have that range. Why? That's how we understand. That's how we solve problems, right? We need everybody. It's how we harness humanity's full potential. To hear the stories, too, that have too often been ignored or dismissed. Mackenzie Allen Charmley of Arizona State University's Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Media has been a Planet Forward Comcast Fellow this last year. She did a story about efforts to bring water to the Navajo Nation, where climate change is complicating this problem. She does a lot of showing in her piece. I want you to see just a clip of it here.
There's a lot of assumption that we have running water, we have infrastructure, that every house on the Navajo Nation has that. But 1/3 of us actually have to work 3 to 4 times harder to attain all the needs that we need for our kids and our families. It's a lot of groundwork.
It's dripping.
It's a lot of being in rural, isolated areas.
Yeah, so we'll have to do a service column.
A lot of people don't know that 1/3 of the Navajo Nation, including my team here, 1/3 of my staff, we don't have running water. We have to haul our water.
You tell stories by going there, right? And by taking people with you. That's how you learn and you listen. I want to introduce an astonishing person to you now, and you might hear a little bit more from her. Matt Scott. He's a social and environmental impact storyteller on a mission, as he calls it, to pass the mic to underrepresented and underestimated climate change makers. He leads the storytelling project at Project Drawdown. He's also, not entirely coincidentally, but close, he is a 2014 George Washington University School of Business alumnus. Matt, where are you? Come on up. Great to see you. I'm just going to hand it over to you and let you talk a little bit about Pass the Mic, what you're doing, and then I think you have a surprise for us.
Yeah, so great to see everybody. Always great to be at GW. And I want to, as I start out, ask you to consider a question. As you navigate crisis, as you seek solutions, who are the voices? What are the voices that aren't represented in those conversations? And literally, look around you. Consider who's sitting next to you here. If you're on the live stream, consider who's in the rooms with you or who you work with. What voices are represented and who's missing from those conversations? Unfortunately, studies often show, or studies have shown, that those most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change and the climate crisis, Black communities, Indigenous communities, communities of color, low-income communities, are also often not represented in climate conversations or in rooms like this, and that's a huge problem. And so, in the spirit of navigating crisis and seeking solutions, we're not taking that sitting down, we're doing something about it, and that's what Passing the Mic is all about. So in my work at Project Drawdown, recently we released Drawdown's Neighborhood, which is a short documentary series featuring climate solutions, and especially featuring people from underrepresented communities who are working on solutions in order to show a much more diverse range of people that they belong and that they have a place when it comes to climate solutions. That is long overdue. And so this conversation that you're about to hear features Mackenzie. It also features Eli Chen, who is the senior editor at the Overheard at Nat Geo podcast, all about passing the mic. So I'll let them take it away. First, I want to bring in Eli Chen, pronoun she, her, senior editor of Overheard at National Geographic, the magazine's science and exploration podcast, as well as former science and environment reporter at the St. Louis Public Radio station, and so much more. Eli, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Matt. Thanks for having me here.
It's great to have you here to have this conversation about passing the mic. And just to kind of start us out and to provide a teaser, how are you passing the mic in the work that you do?
I try to pass the mic by literally putting an actual microphone, since I'm a podcaster, in front of communities that have historically been left out of the conversation, and just simply listening to everything they have to say.
What's motivated you to do that work?
Yeah, so I think when it comes to environmental issues, the air we breathe, the water we drink, the land we live on, like everyone needs to be a part of that discussion. And I was an environmental reporter for several years, and whenever I attended stakeholder meetings about these, issues that we all are a part of, I rarely ever saw people of color in the room. And if there were any, I could count the number of them on my hands. And that includes myself as well. So as I continue to see that pattern, I feel, motivated to tell the stories of people who aren't at those meetings, because these are big, impactful decisions that are being made, without their input.
Yeah, I want to ask specifically about something from your work at St. Louis Public Radio. I read recently that you explicitly were focusing on prioritizing, like interviewing scientists and underrepresented groups, including women of color. But why was that so important to you and to the station at the time?
We have to recognize that science isn't done in a vacuum. Like every scientist, they bring with them their personal experiences, their upbringing, into the work that they do. So, their life experiences inform the work they do, and it improves the science. It also improves the public understanding of that science.
I want to know, how are you bringing those experiences or those priorities that you had previously into the work that you're doing now at Nat Geo?
Our episode in, I believe, the summer of 2021 that was aligned with Nat Geo's issue on tree shade, and who gets it and who doesn't get as much tree shade. And the communities that got more of it, they tend to be more white, more wealthy, and as opposed to the communities of color in say Los Angeles or where I live in St. Louis. So we talk to people in those two different cities to get their story.
But is there any advice that you have for other storytellers, thinking of student storytellers in particular, as they go about their careers? In particular, do you have any advice for how they can pass the mic and ensure that we are creating more representation for folks who need to be heard and represented in the popular narrative?
I think the most important thing is to have empathy with the people you want to talk to, the people whose stories that you want to learn from, and know that it takes time. Like in the beginning, you're gonna run into a lot of like difficult interactions and hurdles. But honestly, I think that it takes patience and it takes empathy to really learn how to pass the mic.
Eli, you're doing really powerful work, and I just want to ask, if you had a magic wand, what's the world that you want to see? What are you hoping that the landscape will look like when it comes to that representation?
I want to see a world in which, people, when they attend meetings about clean air or clean water, that they meet people of different backgrounds, and that they get that they learn from each other with respect. I think that's the kind of world that I would like to see in the future.
Thank you so much, Eli. Now I'm here with Mackenzie Allen Charmley, pronoun she, her. Mackenzie is a journalist from Anchorage, Alaska, and a senior at Arizona State University. And on top of all of that, Mackenzie is a Planet Forward, Comcast, NBC Universal Sustainable Storytelling Fellow, a Native American Journalism Association Fellow, and a Cronkite News Politics reporter. Welcome, Mackenzie.
Thanks, Matt. It's great to be here.
Mackenzie, in a sentence, how are you passing the mic to the voices that often go unheard?
Yeah, so I pass the mic by striving to be an advocate in my storytelling. I really want to spotlight and bring awareness to issues that ultimately inspire others to take action.
All right, let's dive more into that. Like, what motivates you to do the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so my passion for journalism started from a young age. I'm a Black and Indigenous journalist, and I grew up in a really small community in Alaska. My tribe has around only a few hundred people. But growing up in that environment, in that community, there were a lot of issues within our own tribe that weren't highlighted or really cared about. So my passion really started there. I decided to pursue journalism, hoping to be a voice for people, for communities where their voices are often left unheard, or if they are represented incorrectly. So my goal is to denounce false narratives from representation, reporting in the past, and spotlight issues, communities the correct way.
Can you tell us more about how you are denouncing those narratives, how you are making that change? I watched Water is Life, Toaina, but I'd love to hear more about that project in particular.
That was an amazing opportunity that I had to tell a story about the Navajo water crisis on the Navajo Nation. And I did that with Planet Forward, and it was really just an amazing opportunity to be on the ground with these people, individuals, organizations who were fighting for solutions. The documentary highlights, topics of environmental justice, water inequity on the Navajo Nation, and it was really wonderful to see the passion that these individuals, organizations had, and also resilience in, advocating for their communities, for solutions in regard to what was going on with climate change and their environment.
Are there any words of wisdom or advice that you have for other storytellers who are of like underrepresented identities? Like any advice you'd give to them for navigating spaces where like often you're the only one in the newsroom, or where often you're the only voice who's from that perspective, who could speak to that perspective?
Evaluate your passions and use that to understand that all it takes is the first step. If you have a desire, if you have a hope to make something different, then anything is possible if you put your mind to it.
Thank you so much for this time. Aren't they incredible? Could we just give another round of applause to Eli and to Mackenzie? And Frank mentioned a second ago the importance of the word diversity, but the other word that I think is so important is solutions, because so often when we're inviting communities of color into the room, Indigenous communities, Black communities, communities that aren't represented, I've experienced this myself, that we might look at those communities as victims and not as part of the solution and as problem solvers. And we cannot solve the climate crisis without climate justice, without the perspectives that haven't traditionally been in the room. And so I'm really thankful for their stories, but also just before inviting Frank back up, want to invite all of you to consider your role, not only as storytellers, which is one of the themes of today, but also as people who have the power to spread the word about work like some of the work we heard about here, work like Drawdown's Neighborhood, which you could check out at drawdown.org/neighborhood, and all of these stories from underrepresented communities. All of you have a role in passing the mic, and I hope you take that role seriously. Frank?
Right. Thank you, Matt. That's awesome. Tell us a little bit about what's sort of next for you and Pass the Mic. Where are you going with this?
Yeah, well, literally. So with Drawdown's neighborhood, actually, we started out with 11 stories from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the city of bridges, a city that was once known as an industrial epicenter and has now kind of evolved to a city that's really focused on climate solutions. And now we're planning on other cities. So if you're from a university in another area, another region, let me know. Get in touch with us. You just go to drawdown.org.
Are you looking for people to work with you?
Oh, looking for people.
What do you want people to do?
Looking for students who are interested in collaborating in some of those cities too, to potentially support some of our work. Looking for universities that want to amplify, screen Drawdown's neighborhood from Pittsburgh, screen it when we're in your cities. So get in touch. And again, drawdown.org/neighborhood. We have a little button and form to let us know that you're interested, and you'll be in touch with me. So thanks for this space, Frank, and for this conversation. Great seeing you.
All right. So this brings me to a place that I'm super, super, super excited about, because I actually have a little news. And I'm going to be joined in a moment by some people who are going to help explain how we made the news. We are very, very proud at Planet Forward to announce today a brand new initiative, which will be the Planet Forward Indigenous Student Correspondent Project. It's in association with the University of Arizona. The project's going to create a space where Native students can consider and tell stories about their communities and environmental issues impacting their communities. It was inspired by two graduate students, two Indigenous students from GW and the University of Arizona. Let me pull them on up here now. They worked together with this idea. They put it together. It's inspiring enough that it actually inspired the funding to get this thing started. So please meet Jory LaFrance and Alexander Cottonor. Alex, GW. Come in the light here so people can see you. So where'd the idea come from?
Yeah, so first I'd like to say, Uliani, thank you everybody for having us here today and just for letting us be part of this conversation. This is very important to both of us. And I'd also like to acknowledge that today we're meeting on the unceded lands of the Piscataway and contemporary Notchitaink peoples today. So for me, it actually started in this past fall semester. I was actually taking an independent studies course with Professor Palmer, who's a senior editor at Planet Forward. And I was looking at how we can better incorporate Indigenous knowledge systems into science communication, but in ways that is more respectful and reciprocal of those communities. Because in the past, science reporting has been quite extractive. And in the past, it's also left our communities feeling harmed by the scientific process. And so through those conversations, I was looking to really reach out to other Indigenous students who are working in this space of trying to balance their Indigenous identities and speaking for their communities, but also wanting to make a difference and talk about issues impacting the environment and our culture. And so I was kind of by happenstance, I was connected with Jory, who actually was one of my classmates in undergraduate as well. So it was great to reconnect, and we realized that this was a real need for Indigenous students across the United States and beyond to have a place where we can come together and share our stories.
Jory, talk a little bit about, first of welcome, because you're in from Arizona.
Happy to be here.
Tell us a little bit about what this is going to be and what you want to come out of it.
For sure, for sure. So Balaja Adrian Machlish. Hello everyone, my Absalogan name is Adrian Machlish, which means fortunate with horses. I'm Jory LaFrance, I'm originally from Montana. I'm happy to be here. And I'm so happy to have the support from Planet Forward and our partners at GW and the University of Arizona. So I'm a true believer in the statement of for Indigenous people by Indigenous people. And I believe that we're in a time of Indigenous resurgence. And we have Indigenous experts who are out here on the front lines doing the work within our communities, but in institutions as well and in political spheres. And this program is important because we have the opportunity to center and amplify Indigenous voices, but also learn from Indigenous experts. And so this program will be Indigenous centered, and we're very happy to get started and create a cohort of Indigenous scholars to learn from Indigenous experts.
I want to ask you both very briefly because there's other stuff I need to get to, but just share with the audience here and our wonderful live streaming audience just a little bit about your community and the indigenous knowledge, culture, people you come from.
For sure, for sure. So my people, the Absalugat people, we come from southeastern Montana, and the reason why we were brought to the Bighorn Mountains area was because of Ichichea, the sacred tobacco seed. And so I'm very, very fortunate to still live on the land that my ancestors have always taken care of, have always been the stewards of. And it's just my responsibility as an Absalugat woman to continue that. I do my PhD research on the Little Bighorn River, which is a river that my people rely on, the bloodline of our land. And I'm just trying to find new creative ways to bring solutions back into our community, but also help other communities as well.
Yeah, and Kwai and Deloitte Alexander. Hi, my name's Alexander. And I am from the Nulhegan Band of the Kosuk Abenaki tribe. So I grew up actually in northern Vermont, but my family comes from the Odanak First Nation Reserve, which is up in Quebec. So I have family on both sides of the border. I come from a long line of maple sugarers. Yes, it's kind of a stereotype that Vermonters are maple sugarers, but
You have samples for us?
yeah. And so I spent a lot of time growing up with my mahome, my grandfather, maple sugaring, and making ash baskets. And those are both forest-based products, which are disproportionately impacted by climate change. As the weather is getting warmer and we have invasive pests coming in, our culture is really under threat. So that's one of the things that I'm really interested in communicating as I go forward in becoming hopefully an educator and a science communicator.
Thanks to you both. How about a
Thank
huge
you so
round of
much.
applause? So awesome. Sometimes people ask me, well, why did you leave CNN and why did you leave journalism? And I'll say, I came here to get inspired. And I'm truly inspired by people like this, by people like you. I call these conversations with the future because you are the future and you are going to help us get there smarter, better. We got a lot of stuff to fix because of a lot of stupid things a lot of people did. But that's the subject of another summit. One thing that we like at Planet Forward that's so much fun is providing opportunities for students. So I'd like to bring my colleague, Dr. Imani Cheers, up because we're going to talk to you now about some of the opportunities for those of you who are watching and certainly for those of you in the room in the year ahead. We'd like you to just kind of make note of this because, you know, with the help of Joe Ree and Alexander, we're going to build a movement here and we want you all to be part of it. So Dr. Imani Cheers is our Director of Educational Adventures.
Hi, guys.
It's kind of fun to be. Come on in the light here so people can see you out in La La Land or wherever they are. Wave. Hello, everybody. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm glad to be with you.
It's exciting to be here in person.
In person. How about that?
Weird.
So what we would like to do is kind of share some opportunities coming up. Is that okay?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
All right. Let's start. Start with, we're going to partner again with FAO. You saw the story a bit earlier with Food and Agriculture Organization. We'll be doing more. If you're interested in that, watch this space.
Yes, students who are interested in food, world hunger, sustainable agriculture, keep your eyes out because we'll be posting opportunities in the coming weeks.
Okay, next.
Internships at Climate and Capital Media.
Climate and Capital Media. Okay, they're looking for a couple of interns. Social media savvy, interested in multimedia. They're interested in having them help connect with other young news consumers around issues of business, financial reporting and journalism, and sustainability. In other words, businesses that are in the green space. So it's sort of a Wall Street Journal for green? I don't know.
I'm here for it. That's
Okay,
super
go for it.
exciting. A research and storytelling trip to Alaska. So students can apply for an opportunity to join GW Geography Department research team to create videos following climate change stories in Yellowknife, Northwest Territories, Canada in December of this year, as well as Alaska, including Fairbanks, oh, bless you, Perdue and Nome. So several really amazing cities.
Amazing. So that's with our geography department, and you would go to these places in the middle of really cold times and do research.
Maybe see the Northern Lights.
How about this? How about this? We're partnering with the film and media producer Kate Raish at the Smithsonian's National Museum of Natural History to gather content for their upcoming exhibition, Our Places Connecting People and Nature.
Very, very exciting. Their team is creating a soundscape that features deeply personal statements from individuals in multiple languages, speaking from their heart about their own connections to nature and their own special places.
So if you want to be part of this and sort of memorialize there, contribute your thoughts, you can go to planetforward.org and find Soundscape, and you'll see some information there.
Very exciting.
We're delighted also to offer a trip to learn, see, and learn about and report from or on or
in
regenerative agriculture. Anybody heard of regenerative agriculture? Okay. So this fall, we'll take students to the nation's heartland, to a place that's both researching and practicing it.
Very exciting. We're also lucky to have a new partnership with the Turner Institute of Eco-Agriculture.
That's the place that we'll be going. This flows from an initiative that we announced at this summit 4 years ago to endow a professorship to honor conservationist, environmentalist, and media mogul Ted Turner, who created CNN and who I worked for. And I am thrilled to tell you that we have now raised more than $3 million to do that. And we will be hiring here at GW the Ted Turner Professor of Environmental Media. Let's take a listen and drop in on Ted's daughter, Laura Seidel, for just a minute.
It is really gratifying to be with you today, knowing we've raised the funds to create the Ted Turner Professor of Environmental Media. This will be an amazing platform for an environmental leader at GW in the heart of the nation's capital. This has meant so much to my father and my entire family and the world, because we need people who can tell powerful stories about our beautiful yet endangered planet that can inform and mobilize the public to make the changes we desperately need. I'm also delighted to share that we've been able to work with Frank and his team to provide support for Planet Forward students to go to one of the Turner Institute of Eco-Agriculture ranches in Nebraska this fall. At McGinley Ranch, these students will see and report on what has been done to research and implement regenerative agricultural practices so we can grow and eat and live sustainably.
So, a couple more, you got it?
Yep. Planet Forward is looking for next year's super talented crop of Planet Forward correspondents. You'll see application information at planetforward.org.
So if you're interested in doing some of this, we'd love that. And finally this, Middlebury. Where's Middlebury? Okay. Sorry, guys, I had to do that. It's kind of where I went to school, where two of my kids went to school, where my wife went to school. So they're again offering Planet Forward scholarships for their summer intensive School of the Environment, which takes place at the Middlebury Institute of International Studies in Monterey, California. So if you're interested in that, where's Kurt Gervich, who's director? So you can see Kurt later, and there are scholarships available for the School of the Environment. So that's some pretty good stuff, huh?
A lot of really exciting things happening.
And you're, as Director of Educational Adventures, trying to...
There will be opportunities that we are planning, and hopefully you'll hear about some of those soon. So take a look.
Watch this space, as we say.
Watch this space,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you, Dr. Cheers.
Thank you, sir.
All right, let's go back to storytelling. And I want to say, by the way, that in the final 20 minutes or 30 minutes of our conversation here, we're going to open this up to the whole room, because we want to hear about what you think we should be looking at, the world should be looking at, what you think is misunderstood or poorly covered, story ideas you have. We'll roll out a whiteboard here, and if you're in our live stream audience, you'll be able to use your chat function and send those to us, and we'll go through some of those. But I want to talk about something that's really quite serious for a minute, a real challenge. How we tell stories is super important. As I mentioned, how we frame them around character, around adversity. But we have to tell them better. We have to tell them more creatively. We have to tell them differently, because we are flooded with so much stuff now, right? So much information, so much media, so much attitude, so much conflict, so much disinformation. So another thing we've done here is look into that. My colleague, Ethan Porter, has been doing some very important research and some experiments on climate change disinformation and how that sticks. So here's what he's got to say and how he summarizes his work.
My research offers good news and bad news for those concerned about misinformation and climate change. The good news is straightforward. We can combat misinformation by exposing people to factually accurate information. And when we do so, people will become more accurate as a result. That's exciting. It suggests that people's misperceptions and confusion about climate change aren't set in stone. And that's the good news. Here's some more troubling news. First, my research has shown that even when people are made more accurate, their beliefs about what should be done don't necessarily change at the same time. In the case of climate change, we can disabuse people of false notions they have about climate change, but in doing so, it's not likely that we're going to also make people more eager to support policies that would actually mitigate climate change. Here's another piece of bad news. Even when people become more factually accurate, those accuracy gains are fleeting. So this is, in my opinion, rather disquieting. When people become accurate at one moment, just a few days later, that sort of accuracy gain may no longer be detectable. Last but not least, in my research, I've shown that skeptical opinion content that casts doubt on climate change, has nefarious effects on belief accuracy. Misinformation can be spread by political leaders and political writers spreading misinformation. And when it's spread in that way, people respond by becoming less accurate as a result.
Which is why we need to be really good, very creative, very accurate storytellers. This is what we need to counter. And if we know anything about COVID, we've lived through it, anything about climate change, how serious the challenge really is. I want you to meet now a remarkable storyteller who actually tries to, and I think succeeds in piercing this, because her stories are so heartfelt, because they're so urgent, because they touch so many people, and because she manages to tell her story in a way that elevates character. And in the story she's going to tell you now, one of those characters is a river. The other character is a lot of people. Arati Kumar-Rao is a masterful storyteller, a National Geographic Explorer. She's writing a book now. She talks and she tries to touch upon what she calls the slow violence of climate change and how it affects dispossessed people. She also happens to be someone who captures visual imagery in a really brilliant way. Please meet Arati Kumar-Rao.
Imagine you're in a house by the river, and the river is the Ganges in West Bengal in India. It's a warm July night. It's moist and it begins to rain. Slowly at first, and then harder and harder. Then there's thunder and lightning, and you begin to hear screams. You begin to hear people running. You step out of your house and you see everyone going helter-skelter. One person has a baby under their arm. A man has a television on his head, and they're grabbing anything they can get their hands on and running. You grab stuff too, and you run as well. You run hard. You run and run until you're soaked to the skin. The next morning, the devastation is plain. The river has eaten up half your village for the 17th time, and now the river is at your doorstep. The river has chewed through paddy fields and turned it into this. Why? Why is a river chewing up its own banks and pushing people inland until they have nowhere else to go? We're landlords to bed and beggars to rise, they say. Why it's doing this? It used to not be like this. Every river does meander in its lower plains, and the people living on its banks know to expect erosion. But this is something different, and for the last 50 years, the Ganga has been doing this. What happened 50 years ago? In 1971, India built a dam across the Ganga, ostensibly to flush out the port of Calcutta, which was silting up. What the engineers did not realize was that Calcutta is on a delta, and the tide brought in 78 times the volume of water than the river could push out. So, of course, the port could not be desilted. What the dam also did was that it held back silt. Ganga is the siltiest river on earth. You don't just build a dam on the Ganga and forget about it. The silt begins to build up behind the dam and raise the riverbed such that the river has no place to go. The right side bank is rocky. The left side is a soft, rich, fertile soil full of paddy fields, mango orchards, villages, marketplaces, hospitals, schools, homesteads, and it gulps everything year after year for 50 years. Oftentimes, it's not the river that devastates, but what we do to it that does. And as a result, hundreds of thousands of people have been rendered homeless, environmental migrants, refugees in their own land. Shorn of livelihood, they are forced to move to overstuffed cities, sans any identity, sans agency, and left to the vagaries of market sources. Those that are left behind in devastated and depleted landscapes with no support whatsoever. With no sources of income, children are married off early. Child marriage is rampant. Every child above the age of 6 is pressed into labor. Child labor is rampant. Infant mortality rates, maternal mortality rates are through the roof. But here's the rub. What this dam does is not limited just to the area around the dam. 400 kilometers downstream is the largest unbroken stand of mangrove forests in the world, a richly biodiverse area, a UNESCO World Heritage Site that depends upon the delicate balance of sweet water and brine. What the dam does is that it diverts the sweet water or fresh water away from the delta and towards Calcutta, the port of Calcutta. And this means that salinity takes over and it is destroying the forest. What the dam also does is hold back the silt. And the silt is vital to replenish and shore up the delta against rising sea levels. Sans the silt, the delta is sinking. And then there's the fish. An anadromous fish, an Indian shad, used to swim all the way upstream to spawn. But now the dam interrupts its progress and it can no longer reach its spawning grounds. This has collapsed one of the most lucrative fisheries in South Asia, plunging hundreds and thousands of fishermen deep into debt. And millions of children are growing up sans an education, sans any healthcare, severely malnourished. This is India's vaunted demographic dividend. We, as chroniclers of the land, have an opportunity and a responsibility to tell these stories, to tell the stories and smash the silos of narrow interdepartmental thinking that causes such flawed and misguided decisions as the Farakka Dam to be taken. Stories have power. Stories have the power to illuminate the interconnectedness, the interdependencies within a biogeographic region beyond political boundaries, and thus help frame policies that do not undermine the innate resilience of a landscape and of its denizens, both human and non-human, such that they can combat anything that nature might throw at them. Thank you.
I think and hope we have Arati joining us now. Do we have Arati joining us live from India? Is Arati there? Yes! Hi there!
Hello. Hi.
And I want to invite a couple students or anybody, if you've got a question or comment for Arati, go to the mic right now while I ask the first one, and then I'll come over to you. Arati, you talked about telling stories and chronicling the land to smash silos. How do you do that without turning people off? How do you do that so that you get a more receptive audience so you can smash the silos?
That's the million-dollar question, and I think it's a long road to that hallowed goal. But it is something that that you start small. You start having these conversations. You start having debates. You start talking about it. You start telling these stories. Of course, as Catherine Boo says, that we're not sure that these stories can actually change policies, but hopefully, maybe better policies will be crafted if the stories of ordinary people are known. And so I think as storytellers, it's our duty to keep talking about this and telling these stories and, lifting it out of obscurity into the spotlight and shining a spotlight because, guess what? This is not just once. This is happening even as I speak now, again and again and again. And so it's up to us to, keep at it and chip away at these silos. It's not going to happen in one fell swoop, unfortunately.
Silos are hardening in some cases, and so it becomes an ongoing challenge. We have a question, I see, from the floor. So would you introduce yourself and fire away?
Definitely. So thank you all so much. Thank you all for being here. Artie, thank you for your work. My name is Candace Clark, also known as Cando, the Farm Plug, and I am a PhD student at the illustrious Tuskegee University. And so, yes, you can clap for that. It's okay. Booker T. Washington, George Washington Carver, right? And so my question, Artie, is basically coming from a place like Tuskegee or a place like India, how do you see your culture as a tool to create alternative forms of value as we move towards a new future?
It's interesting. I think every land, mine, that is India, yours, every land has lessons in and of itself. I think what we need to do is listen to the land and pay attention to local geographies. If we lose sight of local geographies, that's when we can be manipulated and misguided and wrong, inappropriate technology stuffed down our throat. So I think it behooves each one of us to educate ourselves about the local geographies and about what our land is built for, or the characteristics of our land, and use appropriate or push for appropriate technologies for that land. And if every one of us does that, I think we'll come up with solutions very organically, and it'll be far more scalable and far-reaching than just adopting from one place to another. I think it's very important for us to pay attention to that local geography.
Artie, thank you. Thank you very much. Artie will join us in that open conversation that I mentioned in the last 20 or 30 minutes here. So Artie, thanks much, and we'll see you again in a few minutes. Appreciate it.
Take care. Thank you. Thanks, Frank.
What Artie does, as I mentioned, is she tells stories. A lot of them are character-based. She's also, as you could tell from the way she speaks and the words she uses, she's a creative storyteller. She conjures up images and ideas and emotions. Creativity can be applied many, many ways to storytelling, and we need to do that. And it's not just when you're writing a story or producing a video and how you speak and engage people creatively. It's the words you use and how you connect. You use characters. That's very much a part of this. I talk about this all the time. Compelling ones. A citizen, a scientist, a farmer, someone who's living with climate change. Build a story around them. Let them talk about their experience, their emotion, their joys and their pain, their adversity and their setbacks. I want to invite my friend Stephen Beschloss up for a brief moment here, because we're going to treat you to something that's very, very powerful and special, I think. Good to see you.
Thank you, Frank.
Stephen does just about everything at ASU, Arizona State University, with affiliations at the Cronkite School, the College of Global Futures, the Narrative
Storytelling Initiative.
The Narrative Story. He's got the longest title in the history of humankind. But that's okay. Very quickly, you did this project called Weathering the Storm.
We did.
Whose voices? What is it?
So it started. Let me go back. It started as straight journalism. We actually put together a team of journalists to gather stories from survivors of extreme weather events on 5 different continents. And those stories helped us to be able to understand what they went through, the futures that they were facing, and how they were looking at the world sort of after that experience. But I thought early on, we gathered those stories, they were published, 10 of them were published by the New Republic, but what we decided early on was to develop a theater piece based on it. And I reached out to a theater director and a playwright. We put together a class, undergraduates and graduate students, to select from those stories. And then from those stories that the class sort of picked, we developed a 40-minute piece. That's what we're about to see, at least as the outcome of the class first, but then this piece, which was developed during the pandemic via Zoom, captured, but it's how can I say it? Well, it's an excerpt of the whole production, and soon this is going to be actually produced as a live performance by PBS.
So this is about a 9-minute clip. 8-minute clip we're going to show you here. The words that people will hear are actual words?
They are real words. There's a little bit of dramatization you'll see in one, but these are true stories, and the first words are all true, what people say, and then the subsequent story is a story that was very much a true story.
And these are actors who are bringing this
Professionals,
to life,
absolutely.
pulled together by a screenwriter. So let's take a look, and then we'll come right back.
Can't control every aspect of climate change. I mean, no one can control slowing down climate change, though the world is too populated. The only thing is, if every country works together to fight it, but that's never going to happen.
When scientists talk about millions of acres burned or other dramatic climate effects, I mean, it just doesn't feel real.
Some people are just not ready to accept facts.
There's nothing that I can personally do, and I'm not going to change my lifestyle because my impact is not going to be substantial enough to do what people are claiming it will do.
This is the problem. People will believe anything. Same with those masked people. We don't need to bother with it.
It's happening, but like not here in Arizona. It's nothing that I need to stab myself over.
No one can do anything unless all of us do something. Belinda!
Honey, let's not start there. Let's go back a bit, okay?
Okay.
Ronnie had just got home from a high school basketball game.
That's right.
I was in the kitchen cooking supper.
I heard thunder, saw the lightning all day.
He comes in, grabs a beer from the fridge, and heads back out to the porch.
In that short time, the creek had risen like 15 feet.
So, Ronnie comes back in and tells me,
"Take your car and get out of this house now."
He takes our camper and pulls it up onto the hill so we'll have a safe place.
Belinda!
Ronnie, tell them what you did for the people in the neighborhood.
Oh, well, the water was full across my street. Fences, trees, walls, other debris were flooding down the creek. I started beating doors, screaming, hollering, getting the neighbors to come out and get up on that hill.
I could hear him screaming.
I got 5 of my neighbors out. One neighbor, a dad, refused to leave. Soon the water was going through their windows. Whole house, whole family, swept away. The rescuers didn't find their 14-year-old girl's body until 2 months later.
Tell them about our son, Ronnie.
Oh, well, our son. His wife and their kids, they were able to escape to the attic. Their house was flooded. My son paddling the water away with his hands to keep his family safe.
He's a good boy, a good man.
He is.
Oh, tell them about the offer you got, the city's new flood victim housing, City of Hope.
Oh, well, I didn't want to stay in that place at all, not at first. I didn't know if I wanted to stay in town. Some people rebuilt the creek. Now, new coding was set into effect after the floods. Houses have to be built 2 feet above the water line. If I had to sleep next to that creek again, I could never do that.
No, of course not.
So I accepted the offer at City of Hope. I live there now, up on the hill. I feel safe.
Also, got some farmland out in Monroe County, about 30 miles west. Going to install some solar, aren't you?
I am, and it's not just a sometimes flooding problem. Too much water when the big rains come. The drought's so bad, springs and rivers dried up. Wells have dried up.
Hasn't been this bad in West Virginia since the 1940s.
The governor issued a warning: not using water for personal use, no water for lawns, washing automobiles, filling swimming pools. We're in real trouble there.
Oh, and the tree cutting.
Cut by the coal mining companies or cut down by the storms.
For decades now, companies have been cutting down the trees to build quarries.
These days, it's just dust and dirt. Nothing will grow. You can see every time going through the coal fields, but they cut the trees.
The white oak trees and the red oak trees.
I don't think people use coal the way they used to. Our governor, he's big on coal mining. He thinks that coal can come back. I have used wood to heat my house my whole life. After every storm, I went out to get the dead wood. I used it. I never cut a tree.
Ronnie.
I tell everybody that material stuff doesn't mean anything. I worked my whole life, and I had anything I wanted. I had more than I needed.
Ronnie.
I tell everybody, we are going to have to educate people, change the ways of living. We need to change because of the climate and how we treat each other. Nature will take its course and the trees will grow back, but it will take time. And that's why we need to do our part now.
It's true. The 2016 West Virginia flood, considered a 1,000-year natural event with a 0.1% probability of happening in any given year, ravaged Greenbrier Valley, West Virginia residents.
Belinda!
Torrential rain and thunder, rising 10 to 12 inches in 12 hours, turned quiet creeks into flash floods, washing away roads and houses and entire neighborhoods. 23 people lost their lives.
Belinda!
Okay, Ronnie. Now,
I told Belinda to take her car and leave the house immediately.
Ronnie didn't know what. But I went back to the house to rescue our dog and cat while he tried to help the neighbors. I became trapped in the house.
I told her over the phone to take the crowbar and the hammer to break the fence and go up onto the porch. I told her when the rescue comes, I would pull the boat up.
The gas line under our house had broken when another house washed down the creek.
Last thing that she said to me was that,
Ronnie, I smell gas.
She smelled gas.
Our house filled up with it. Explosion blew it up and threw me and the cat into a tree.
They ended up hanging in that tree for the next 4.5 hours.
I died a week later at the hospital from the explosion burns.
Belinda?
That tree still stands. It's part of a local memorial.
She was my angel. I love her, and I miss her.
Like Ronnie said, we are going to have to educate people, to change their ways of living, to make a change. Nature will take its course, but it will take time.
That's why we have to do our part now.
Question:
Do you believe in man-made climate change?
Is an old question.
It's not the most important question.
And it's not the question we ask here today.
We can see with our own eyes.
Around the world.
Physical reality, more intense and more extreme weather.
And a rising tide of weather-related death and displacement.
Do we think it is in our power to recognize this change and act with urgency?
Do we want to make a difference?
Are we able to work together to make a difference?
If we start to make a difference, is there a benefit that extends beyond issues of climate?
What's the conversation you believe we need to have?
What's the action you believe we need to take?
Are we, America, place of global citizens that can offer leadership
and collaboration
with nations and peoples and industries around the world
to make a better future for all?
Or are we not?
I don't know how many times I've watched that. I still tear up at the.
Actually, so do I.
It's just.
Yeah.
That's the power of story and character, right?
Yeah. I mean, how do you create emotion, first of all? How do you get to people's head, but how do you get to people's heart? And how do you create empathy? Right? So it's not just a question of, do you believe in climate change? Because you know what, whether you do or you don't, your house might burn down too. Your house could end up in a flood or a hurricane and so forth. So that's been the conversation for quite a number of years. Now it's like, let's actually start to look at what the impacts are and how lives are affected. And so the people that we sort of sought out to tell their stories, we call them sort of voices from the future. We did that really specifically because they're looking at, they've experienced futures that all of us sooner or later are going to, one way or another, more extreme, more or less, but in one way or another.
You're doing amazing stuff. Thank you very, very much. This is phenomenal. And Stephen will be around if you want to talk to him some more about this and be part of the conversation that we've got coming up.
Thank you, Frank.
Brilliant. All right, one more conversation here that seems very fitting and a strong way to close before we go to our StoryFest prizes. How many finalists do we have in the room for StoryFest? Oh, okay, we're getting there. To see who wins. And then open it up to this room for conversation about what we should be thinking about, what we should be focusing on, what stories we should do. So creativity. It's what Arati does. It's what Stephen Beschloss has done with this remarkable piece of climate theater. Some of it comes from the gut, but some of it comes from the tools that we now have. When I started at CNN years ago, if I went out to shoot a story, there was somebody operating the camera, somebody doing sound, somebody doing light. There was a producer and me, 5 people. No lie, I'm serious about that. Today, you can go out with this, and you can shoot it, you can do your sound, you can edit it, you can promote it, you can distribute it. You and this. You are an unbelievably powerful storyteller. From anywhere, virtually, at any time, you can do it. You're standing in front of a flood, you can talk about it. You're standing in front of a house, you can record it. You're standing in front of somebody brilliant, you can talk to them. So I want to bring you into a conversation here. Our Planet Forward correspondent, Diana Quintero. Diana, will you wave to everybody in the room? Diana is here with us. Diana is a student at Arizona State University as well, a Cronkite school. They're kind of a powerhouse, which is why so many roads come through here. But we invited Diana to talk to a remarkable person about creative storytelling, a woman named Mala Sharma. She is vice president of Adobe's Creative Cloud. How many have heard of Adobe, right? Adobe Photoshop, Adobe Premiere, and on it goes, all right? So like superpower, super way for you to elevate and amplify your story. Here's Diana talking with Mala Sharma.
I'm super excited to be here to get the conversation started about creativity and storytelling. So just to start off, tell me a little bit about what you do at Adobe and what do you aim to teach through the educational element of your role?
While I enjoy everything I do, I have a special place for education in my heart because of the impact it can have, not just on the next generation, but through them on the world at large. One of the things that we've learned as we've spent time with teachers and students through research we've done is that between 80 to 90% of them believe that the jobs of the future are going to be completely different than the jobs that exist today. That creativity as a skill is going to be important for the success of the future workforce, and that not enough is being done in schools and in the education system to teach creativity and curiosity and creative problem solving
Yeah, as a student, I definitely see how professors are starting to want to dive into more creative ways of teaching all sorts of topics and majors as well. So just tell me a little bit of how you got involved in all of this.
I decided about 5 years ago during my sabbatical to go and volunteer at Teach for India. As I was leaving the classroom, the kids were talking about how confident they feel, like they would keep creating these videos. And I just came back inspired and convinced that Adobe's role, our role in the world, is to help empower the next generation to tell their stories, to help them build confidence and have an impact.
Wow, I love that. I think that's a really great example of how just adding creativity into our lives can also help us form connections with different people, just the way your students connected with you. So, what role do you think that creative storytelling plays in the climate movement?
Every scientist or every everybody who has an idea needs to be able to break it down and tell a story, and the power of creative expression is therefore so important.
So, how do you think that young journalists and creators like myself could be making a deeper impact in the way that we share stories?
It starts with the creator or the storyteller really understanding and going deep in that area of interest that they have. And that requires you to be out there. If you want to tell a story about nature, you need to be out there to understand it. You have to do your research. And then you have all the tools in the world to break it down.
So, what are some different methods for storytelling, and what tools do you think are more effective to grab an audience's attention?
You have to bear in mind who is your audience. If the goal of the journalist is to have an impact, and if your audience is ultimately a diverse audience, you have to represent them in whatever story you're telling for that to appeal to them, for that to be relevant to them.
Yeah, and I think that that's one of the most beautiful things about storytelling is being able to shine light on some of those issues that we don't hear about as much, and just being able to give a voice to those people who sometimes might feel like they don't have one. So, what challenges do you find people encounter when diving into creative outlets?
I think they're not sure they're creative, it's just this hesitation.
What would you recommend for them to be able to find that? Is it just diving into all the different editing softwares and different forms of storytelling, or what could they be doing right now in order to find that creativity within themselves?
I'd break it down, Diana, first and foremost, is to understand the problem really well. And when it starts becoming meaningful to you, it'll generate internal kinetic energy for you to go solve the problem.
So, just as we wrap up our conversation, what would you say is the most important thing to keep in mind when it comes to creative storytelling?
Know your audience, be curious so you get all the facts, and then be authentic and make sure you represent your audience in your story.
Thank you so much for joining us, Mala. It was a pleasure to speak with you today.
Oh, it was wonderful to speak to you. I wish you the best in your journalism career, and I hope that you have amazing impact in the world. Thank you.
All right, words to live by, amazing impact in the world. That's awesome. All right, so every year, and what we've been doing across this year is collecting stories, getting stories that have been submitted to StoryFest and all the rest for our competition. It's amazing to see what people do. We have several categories, which you'll see in a minute, stories submitted in all formats and all genres. We partner with Lindblad Expeditions, and you'll hear more about that in a minute, which offers cabins on their ships, which go to amazing places for our StoryFest grand prize winners to go out and see and learn, spend time with scientists, biologists, amazing guides who know incredible amounts of stuff, and then capture that and stories and tell us back, and tell them back. I'd like to invite Dr. Cheers, Imani Cheers, to join me again up here, because You've been with us on a couple of these Lindblad expeditions.
I have.
You've led the student stories.
Led the students.
I've been there to
Amazing.
watch you.
It's been phenomenal.
Learn from you.
Phenomenal. One of my favorite, I will say, these educational adventures, these academic adventures, are 2020 winners. I want to thank them again because Galapagos still, it was the absolute amazing trip of a lifetime, and that's where the 2020 winners went very recently.
And they just went there recently with Kim Osi, who led this trip. So should we show a couple of stories? Few stories from what they did?
Just one or two.
Go ahead, fire. Well, actually, we have pictures of what they shot. We'll tell you quickly about the stories.
Yes, this is Dipti Bansal-Gage. She wrote, The Past, Present, and Future of the Galapagos Marine Protection. She's an environmental lawyer now and has reported that the legal mechanisms protecting ecosystems are also evolving.
So we also had Jake Myers, who was a student at the University of Arizona. None of these folks are students now because they graduated. They were supposed to go out in 2020, but then COVID happened, so it took a while. And then Lindblad said, no, we're going to all have to be patient here. So anyway, Jake was on this trip too. He reported at the University of Arizona, the evolution of a naturalist. He was profiling a guy named Juan Carlos Avila, who grew up on a farm in the Galapagos. Today he works to help conserve the archipelago, working with Lindblad.
We have Avery Van Eaton. Numerous endemic species endure in Galapagos and fighting to survive in the place that once inspired survival of the fittest, northwestern Medill.
And Kate Twining Ward, she was a student at GW, so she did a story called Harnessing the Power of Travel to Traverse Inequality. And she wrote, when we think of the Galapagos, we think of incredible biodiversity, but what many of us don't learn about is the humans who also live there. So she did a story about people who live in the Galapagos and are from the Galapagos, native to that remarkable part of the world. Oh, look what I just did.
We have learned. This year, Lindblad will be taking students to Alaska, the big, bold, and beautiful, which is very exciting.
It's true. And so what we want to do now is show you something that's very important before we invite Sven Lindblad up here. This is a place that is big and beautiful, as Dr. Cheers just said, but it's also reeling from climate change.
Absolutely, reeling and changing. So Kelsey Nyland is a postdoctoral research scientist here at GW, and she is working on a project funded by the National Science Foundation called Circumpolar Active Layer Monitoring, also known as CALM.
Kelsey, where are you? She's in the back, okay. The program has, what, 300 sites, I think you said, around the Arctic, Antarctic, Alaska, monitoring permafrost and climate. Kelsey tells us ever so briefly about the research and what they're finding.
Every year, we bring students to collect new data, and a number of these sites have now reached data records greater than 25 years in length. So with long-term records, we can look at trends, and what we've observed is that there is indeed significant rapid climate warming occurring in Alaska, and we're seeing the response to the permafrost system. So when we have permafrost warming and thaw, it actually can damage infrastructure. So specifically, we look at something called ice cellars. We work in one village called Utqiagvik. This is formerly known as Barrow. It's the northernmost community in all of Alaska. And there, what they do is it's a majority Inupiat population. So they hunt bowhead whales, caribou, walrus, and many other large game. That doesn't fit in your typical freezer in your home. What they've done for millennia instead is actually excavate spaces into permafrost to store all the meats they've hunted. Now, what's unfortunately been happening, and it seems to be increasing over the last few decades, is that they're flooding and collapsing. It's also a really important component and plays into spirituality around the whale and relationships with nature. So when we see that ice cellars are no longer a confident way to store meats, it brings a lot of questions into play for the community. Not only how do we preserve the tradition and pass it along, but also questions about food security and even finance. It's well understood that based on long-term records, based on global scale models, climate change is happening much faster and to a greater extent in the Arctic. So we look to these Arctic communities as canaries in the coal mine. They are experiencing the first and some of the most dramatic negative impacts of climate change.
Okay, Sven Lindblad, come on up. So Sven, thank you. It's wonderful to see you. Join us. Let's see, we're supposed to be right here. You're supposed to be there. You're supposed to be there. How about that? Can you see us okay? Are we doing all right? Yeah. So Sven, Kelsey's research is really concerning about Alaska. You go there, you go all around the world. You seeing this sort of climate change happening as you travel?
Most definitely. So we were talking, Kelsey and I, just prior to the event. I'm going up to a place called Svalbard. I don't know how many of you have heard of Svalbard. That's the Norwegian Arctic. I first went there in the early 70s, and we could not go before July because of sea ice. And then some years later, we started going in June, and then in May, and a few years ago, I went in. 2 years ago, I went in March. And now I'm going next week in April. So this was just, I mean, that's a very, very good example of a place that has changed dramatically as a consequence of climate change. But I was in the Antarctic, and you see it all over the place in one form or another.
Before we go to StoryFest, I want to thank you for making these expeditions available to our students, but maybe very quickly you could take people back to kind of the genesis of this idea. I mean, you and I met, and you instantly went to this idea of storytelling. Here you're running this incredible company, taking people all over the world, and it ain't cheap to travel with you. And you said, sorry, it's true. But you said stories.
It is for the winners.
Okay, fair enough. But you went with the story thing. Why?
Well, look, first of all, I think we are all potentially soldiers of a battle that needs to be fought. And the battle is to get our sanity back as it relates to our relationship with natural systems and climate and such. And so anybody who has an idea that furthers the opportunity to tell stories, I immediately gravitate to. So I'm a leap of faith kind of guy. So I met you through a friend of ours, joint friend of ours at National Geographic. He said, this guy has got an incredible project called Planet Forward. You should support it. And I said, all right, let's meet and let's talk about it. It took about 5 minutes. And I said, he's got a great idea. Let's support it. And it was really that simple. And it's been a great relationship ever since. Kismet.
It's great. Well, you're awesome, and these are amazing opportunities for students. But what's really interesting is aboard ship, the guests are encouraged to be storytellers, everybody, because one of the things that is really clear is going and seeing and then explaining and telling the story has impact on other people. All right, should we go to StoryFest?
Let's do it.
Okay, so we start. So just so everybody understands, students do their stories. They submit them. They get reviewed, and then they get posted. They are in the running for StoryFest. We have judges. They look at them in these categories. First category, most compelling character, right? You can't tell a story without a character.
Navigating Climate Change Through Song, a Q&A with Pine Grove's Even Steffens Hall, Ryan Bieber, Ithaca College.
Plantita Power, microgreens in the district, as in the District of Columbia. Jennifer Kuyush, she's a George Washington University student.
Should you be taking pictures of roadkill? Citizen Science Aids Research Efforts. That's Clarice Skinny from SUNY Plattsburgh.
I built my dream. Southeast Asian woman grows local food, cultural acceptance in Missouri Ozarks, by Lauren Ulrich, Indiana University Bloomington.
And the winner is?
Should we do the envelope, please? The envelope, please.
Very dramatic.
It's kind of like, only not.
Okay, so I'm supposed to read this.
Read that and then that.
Okay, so the most compelling character winner is Jennifer Kuyuch.
Kuyuch.
Kuyuch? Did I pronounce that correctly?
Is Jennifer in the room? Where's Jennifer?
All right.
Okay.
So through her warm interviews and vibrant use of music and graphics, the judges say Jennifer not only conveys the character of Plantina Power's founder, Steph, but also their community and spirit of care and life plants that they cultivate.
Great. All right. Next, congratulations, Jennifer. Next category, most creative story. Coastal Child, a video essay on ocean conservation and education, Caitlin Copland, Eckerd College.
Coastal Degradation Through Fresh Eyes, a picture book come to life by Delaney Graham of SUNY ESF.
SUNY ESF, Welcoming Our Feathered Neighbors, Paula Milikova and Maya Thompson, University of California, Berkeley.
Ice Plant Equals Climate Change, Cameron J. U. Mock from Middlebury College.
Okay, Sven, you get another envelope, Most Creative Story.
Most Creative Story.
Our winners.
Don't you feel sad sometimes that there have to be winners and losers?
Can I tell you?
Everyone's a winner.
Everybody's
a winner.
All of our finalists should be winners, all right? But judges had to pick one. And the winner is?
The winner is Delaney Graham. So, a thoroughly absorbing story built around storybook characters. Amka's friend is a puffin who is homeless because of coastal erosion. They embark on a journey of discovery and hope. The story works and the characters pop. The judges were taken by the character and the content.
Brilliant. Congratulations.
A homeless puffin.
Oh, well, you know. Next category is?
Best Scalable Innovation.
Okay, Water is Life. To'i'ina. Groundwork to Solving Water Inequity on the Navajo Nation. Mackenzie Allen Charmley, Cronkite School, Arizona State University.
How Trees Can Save a Drowning Desert, Farzana Comas, George Washington University.
What does $3 million of seaweed look like? Michaela Campo, George Washington University.
College Food Insecurity, Eating Away at Student Success, Connor Gerbis, University of Wisconsin-Madison.
As Arizona agriculture runs dry, new irrigation tech could help. Diana Quintero, Cronkite School, Arizona State University.
The winner is?
And the, wait.
Got to get the right envelope.
I got to get the right envelope. This would
Best
be right.
Scalable Innovation.
There we go, Best Scalable Innovation.
Didn't something happen at the Academy Awards with the wrong envelope?
Totally.
Let's not do that.
That's not.
Okay, so the winner is Farzana Komnas.
Yeah.
Did I pronounce that correctly? Beautifully written and photographed, this story is personal to Farzana, focusing on deserts in her native country of Jordan. They're becoming hotter and drier as a result of climate change. Farzana proposes planting forests and desert. Sound impossible? She cites an initiative in Lebanon that has done just that. The practice is called Afforestation Project Drawdown, rates it 15th about the most significant steps we could take to reverse global warming. The judges say the story delivers.
Nice.
Fantastic.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Best use of science and data. Okay, this is important.
Breakthrough research takes a step towards converting carbon dioxide pollution into fuel. Hannah Krantz, George Washington University.
Mammoth resurrection may be a climate solution. Should it be? Skylar Epstein, George Washington University.
Hope flows through the heart of Tucson. Haley Hughes, the University of Arizona.
And Fishing Harbor's community development and climate change threaten it. Carter Weinhofer, Eckerd College.
The winner is
Best use of science and data. And the winner is?
The winner is Hallie Hughes, University of Arizona. I'm making a real mess here, but the judges say Hallie brings the science and data to real-world life in her story about the Santa Cruz River Heritage Project, a trickle of water that represents enormous change. The story captures the heart and soul of the living desert. As Hallie writes, making Tucson more drought resilient, conserving water resources, supporting critical biodiversity, connecting a city to its heritage, and educating a new generation.
Bravo, okay. And finally, our last category.
Best Science Narrative. First, we have Eternity is Upstream, a call for salmon habitat protection. Claire Babbitt-Bryan, Middlebury College.
A Tale of Two Mountains, battling climate change and wildfires at home and abroad. Ryan Bieber, Ithaca College.
Bats are facing an epidemic of their own, white nose syndrome. Helen Bradshaw, Northwestern University.
In Search of Roommate that pays rent and nutrients and water. Michaela Campo, George Washington University.
Planting Seeds of Mental Health Wellness in the Face of COVID-19 Stressors, Poonam Nartham, Northwestern University.
And the final envelope, please.
All right. Best Science Narrative goes to Ryan Bieber, Ithaca College. Okay, the judges say Ryan weaves a compelling narrative built on the science. It is a tale of two Sierras. In California, the Sierra Nevada has experienced 9 out of 10 of the state's largest wildfires in the last decade. In Spain, monoculture replanting in the Sierra Nevada became a fire trap. This story is a compelling narrative of learning and loss, showing distinct ways that human activity has led to the devastating wildfires.
All right, congratulations. Hey, do we have some of our winners here? Come on out. How about a quick picture? All right. Do we have any other? Here we go. Come on down. Come on down. Come on down. Yeah. Here you can use these steps. We got a camera in the room. Somebody. What do you think, Sven? How'd they do?
They did great.
They did great. All right. All right, Sven. Let's put you in the middle. All right. And Imani and I will be on the sides. Let's crunch together, everybody. All right. First, how about a huge round of applause for our winners? Thank you, guys. It was awesome. Awesome. All right. Where's our camera? Where are we? We're mugging to that camera, so say hi to the live stream audience.
Right in the middle there.
And there's Victoria. Thank you. All right, and how about our finalists? Do we have finalists in the room? Come on up. Come on up. If you're a finalist, come on up. Come on, come on, come on. Let's do a picture with them. Your stories, all these stories are amazing. If you haven't read them, seen them, watched them, heard them, go to Planet Forward. If you crunch in behind us or in front of us, or how do we do this? All right. Look at that. What a great, this is amazing. All right. Together, everybody, we've got to crunch together. All right, we need a lower row. Are we doing okay?
I'm not.
All right.
Getting on the ground.
Victoria, where are you?
Right there.
Okay. Everybody look at Victoria. Wave. I just want to say, on behalf of everybody in this room, thank you. You have all done creative, powerful, thoughtful, thought-provoking stories from all different walks of our lives, and there's more to do. Whatever you do, whether you are journalists or filmmakers or scientists or activists or business leaders, whatever you do, you will keep telling stories in one form or another. And that kind of communication, that kind of storytelling will make you more effective, impactful, successful. And you'll move the planet forward. So one more round of applause, please, for everybody. All right, I'm going to invite you back down. And at this point, I'd like to invite Arati back up. We're going to invite Lisa out here. And we're going to open this up for about 15 minutes for a conversation from you and from the floor with your ideas, your thoughts, your suggestions. We've been talking about story here today. We've been, thank you. How about a hand for Sven? All right. I do want to say on behalf of Planet Forward and everybody, one of the things that's so interesting about Lindblad expeditions is Lindblad works with their populations and they support local artistry and local conservation. They're very active in sustainability and sustainable tourism. So now we want to open this up. I think we're going to bring Arati back if she's still around. And I'd like to invite my colleague, Sonia LeBlanc, up as well. Sonia, join me. That's fine. That's good. Lisa Palmer is joining us as well to take notes from this. Sonia is in what we call SEAS. That's our School of Applied Sciences and Engineering, right? Or School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. I get it right, Frank. And tell people a little bit about the lab that you've got, the living lab that you've got, the work you're doing in the energy space.
Yeah, we do a lot of work where we look at how energy in all its forms is integrated into our lives. And we use the world around us, our campus, for example, as a living laboratory. Thank you. So, for example, 50% of George Washington University's electricity is supplied by 3 solar farms. And when those solar farms were built, we took students down to the site and walked around, and then we built case studies around that experience of GW engaging in that. What are the techno-economic aspects when you do utility scale solar in the mid-Atlantic? What are the economic hydrological considerations? So we use our campus as a living laboratory, and we use the world around us and our communities in DC as living laboratories where we get to explore questions around energy and our energy system.
One of the other things you do, which I want to call out, is you're a gigantic advocate for the sciences and for women of color in the sciences.
I am.
So I'd love for you to share your passion on that with the room.
So I am. I am an advocate for participation from all walks of life in science and engineering. In particular, I'm very proud that we have so many women who are deciding to go into science and engineering, increasingly more and more. 45% of our School of Engineering undergraduate population is females who are studying to become engineers, which is really exciting. We're a leader in the nation in that. And so I think that what has a lot of impact for me is when students tell me, and I teach the main undergraduate class I teach is thermal systems design to senior undergraduates, and I will have women who tell me, you're the first female engineer that I have seen, and that means a lot to me. I didn't have any until I was in graduate school. I had one class taught by a woman, and I have 4 degrees in engineering.
Wow.
And the entire time
Wow.
didn't have classes taught by women.
Well, that's awesome. Okay, well, we're going to, as I said, make this a conversation, open it up to your ideas and thoughts. And what Lisa's going to do is jot on the whiteboard, if you have something you're passionate about, something you've experienced, some work, an internship, a class, anything that you've done that you think the public and the world needs to understand better, or that we should explore. We'll jot that down, and what we're going to try to do over this next year is pursue some of those. Maybe you'll do it. Maybe you'll do it. Or maybe one of our correspondents will do it. One of the reasons I asked Sonia to join me here is because this really is an all-hands-on-deck kind of thing, and all disciplines are needed if we're going to deal with this, right? Arati, before we begin, I just very quickly want to turn to you, and then let me ask all of you to let the wheels roll, because we're going to go boom, boom, boom really quickly and hear from people, and let's see what we can do and what we can follow for next year. But Arati, you heard us talk today about crisis, about solutions, about characters in storytelling, creative storytelling, trying to get these creative narratives across. I'm just wondering if you have 30, 60 seconds of sort of a takeaway from today's conversation and how people need to think about this as they think about storytelling.
In listening to this fascinating session, Frank, kudos to you guys putting it together. It's just been so amazing, so inspiring. One thing that came forward as I heard the different people speak is that how interconnected everything is when it comes to climate change as a problem. And we as storytellers, and this goes back to that silo question actually, we as storytellers are in this unique position where we can talk to multiple people. We can talk to a hydrologist, we can talk to a public health specialist, we can talk to a food specialist, we can talk to various people to piece the story together. And I think that recognizing that interconnectedness and bringing that forth, because, as John Muir said, that if you tug on something, you find it attached to a whole web. That needs to come out. It's not just one thing. This is a problem of such dimensions that it's going to come back to bite us, in some different way. And this pandemic has shown us, how that can happen too. So I think, as storytellers, we need to pay attention to that interconnectedness and, make it as multidisciplinary, just as Sonia just mentioned too, multidisciplinary, bring in those different voices to see to try and paint the gamut of the kind of crisis we're facing.
Can I just
true.
say
Yes,
one thing about interconnectedness? So my parents are from Bangladesh. So Arati, your story was beautiful to me because I actually just did an event with my daughter, who's in an international school, telling the story of how my parents are from a village in Bangladesh and what it looks like there. And so that's the interconnectedness that you didn't realize you were going to get.
It's stories about, through, and for, and of people. All right, I'd like to open this up. Please don't be bashful. We're going to move around quickly. An idea for a story, an idea for an issue, a person that we should know about. Who wants to go first? If you don't know, I'm going to swoop down and call on you. Come on, you're here for a reason. Who wants to go? Yes. Do we have a mic? We'll run the mics around. Who's next? Well, before you start, next over here, next mic over here. Who's on this side of the room? Over here. Okay, we'll start over here. Go ahead.
Yeah, so
introduce yourself and tell us where you're from.
Hi, my name is Isabella. I'm from Central Texas. I'm currently in C's at the George Washington University. Go engineering, yeah. And there is a tribe, a Native American tribe called the Kugeltekin, who are not a federally recognized tribe in the United States. They are actually one of the largest Native American cultural groups in the United States. They occupy the band of what we say as Texas, all the way into northern Mexico, Southern California. And because they don't have any real records for keeping their cultural history, the United States will not recognize them as a real tribe. In fact, they are considered to not exist.
So you think the story should look at what this tribe is and how they should be recognized?
I think that a large group of people who say that they are part of a culture, who say they exist, should be allowed to exist.
All right. Give us your name again. We'll come back to you and work with you on this.
All right. My name is Isabella Elmore.
Isabella. Okay. We'll come back. Stay tuned. Next, who's got the mic? Where's the next mic? Go ahead.
Hi there. My name is Kate Tolano. I am a senior at Middlebury College in Vermont. I actually have a question and a theme. And it's, as storytellers, we have this immense power because we are framing how people understand an issue or see the world, and it relates to truth. And so what are ways that we can check in as these storytellers and ensure that we are telling the story as it is, rather than the story that we might want to frame in our heads? So this exploration of what is true, especially in the worlds that we live in now.
So the issue that you're trying to tee up is it how we tell stories and reflect truth that go beyond our own experience or beyond our own frame of reference? Arati, can you comment on that very quickly?
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing, and I think to answer her question, the way you would want to tackle that is to give yourself plenty of time and field. Go back to places over seasons and over the years as you build the story, because the first impressions are never the full story, and you'll get sound bites from people rather than really how they feel, unless you really spend time with them, and and then all the barriers fall away, and then they start talking. So I think, and again, so many times when I go into field, what I have read and heard about it, it turns out to be completely different when I go to field and I see and I hear the people who are actually experiencing it speak when I hear them speak. So, give yourself a lot of time and listen rather than speak or try to suggest. It's more important to listen. And I think that is a key thing. As communicators, we, listening is as big a part as speaking or as actually saying things. So that's really important. And time is of the essence. You really need to spend time with communities and in landscapes to be able to begin to unearth the truth. It takes years.
It does take years. There are some folks here from my class, Art of the Interview, right? And we talk about the best interviewers are also the best
listeners.
Pop quiz.
Yes.
So I'm interested in stories about land. Oh, first, yeah. I'm sorry. I'm Dr. Chavers from Tuskegee University.
What's your news?
I'm Dr. Chavers, a recent graduate. But I'm interested in stories about land and how it relates to the African diaspora. So I recently did my research in Liberia, and I focused on highlighting the stories of rural farmers. And it made me think about what happens in the States when it comes to heirs properties, especially me being a student in Alabama and also doing farming in Georgia, just how we can highlight the cross-cultural connection that the African diaspora has regarding land. So I think that'll be a great story.
That is a phenomenal story. We actually had a student from Tuskegee do a story on black farmers and the experience of black farmers and how land has been such an issue that didn't happen and has then been taken away and all. Would love to pursue that with you and talk about that some more. I'd love to see that. We could do that story next year. And
great.
And yeah.
I'm going to go out on a limb here, Frank, and I'm going to
introduce yourself again in case people don't remember.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm Candace Clark, also known as Cando the Farm Plug from the illustrious Tuskegee University. Yes, home of Booker T. Washington and Dr. George Washington Carver. I'm going to go out on a limb and say cannabis. I think cannabis should be something that we're talking about way more, not only because of the war on drugs, but because of its regenerative properties and its ability to be bioremediatory. Literally, when we talk about healing the soil, kissing the ground, for example, cannabis can do that. And it is a crop that gives us the opportunity to really look back at the past, rectify some of the things in the past, and then look to the future as a collective. So, and I get really excited when we talk about it, but I'm going to throw it up there because it's the crop of the future.
I love it.
And we need it.
I have this hunch that a story like that would get some people reading or watching. What do you think?
I think so. I agree with that. I have something here from our online, our virtual people. Frank, it's me behind you.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
So we have Dr. Christy Swain from she's a faculty member from our consortium school at the University of Mississippi. She asks, kind of looking at how can we effectively bring ecology and biodiversity research into broader conversations about sustainability and moving the planet forward. So I'd like to hear somebody here, maybe Dr. Scully here, somebody could bring up some ideas around bringing this ecology and biodiversity research into the sustainability stories.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, I think
You're still mic'd.
Am I still mic'd?
Yep.
There you go. I think it's really important, speaking to equity issues, is when a system is more biodiverse, it's more supportive of clean air, clean water. Everyone around a more biodiverse system is healthier. And so we really need to start thinking about the systems around our urban centers. We're trying to do that on our own campus by planting sustainability plants, meaning native plants that attract native animals, that then build our system so it's biodiverse. You don't have to replant. I know that you do see us replanting a lot, but there are a lot of areas where we don't have to replant because we have the native species there. They are attracting those animals, and we have healthier system, cleaner air, like I said, and cleaner water because of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the stories that can come out of this, of these areas, the intersectionality, which we keep talking about, I think are really powerful. It's like the engineering stories. I mean, all of these are expressions of both the problem and the solutions, and so how we pursue them. The characters that we pick are very important. Like, who do you focus on? Who's your hero? Who's your main character? A couple of other ideas from the floor over here, and then we got to get a mic over to this gentleman over here, and in the back. Let's do it quickly, and we'll pop around, and we'll have you out of here in 5 minutes, everybody. So go.
Hi everyone. My name is Silje Christiansen. I'm assistant professor at SUNY ESF. I grew up on an industrial chicken farm, and I think there's so many different stories to be told from many different perspectives about industrial farming, but especially industrial animal agriculture. It has a huge impact on our environment and, of course, the animals and people's health.
Great. Okay, you got that, Lisa? We good on that one? That's a great idea. We've had some students who've done that. We'll do more. Let's pass the mic right over there while we're in the neighborhood. And then we'll go to the back of the room, and then we got to come over here because we've been promising.
Hi, my name is Vidya Motopilla. I'm a first semester student here at GW, and my home city is Houston, Texas. We had an initiative by Houston Youth Climate Strike that was called Stories from a City of Storms, and it focused on the experience of young people growing up on the front lines of climate change. I think it would be a fabulous idea to chronicle that across the nation and really connect to young people to show how it's different to not just experience the climate crisis, but grow up with it on the front lines.
Oh, that's really interesting. That's Professor Beschloss, that might be something that you come back.
It sure is.
Yeah. Okay, we're on this side of the room. You have the mic?
Should bring right here mic.
Hi, I'm Skylar. I'm one of the correspondents. I'm also a senior here at GW. So my idea was basically, it's less like a specific issue and more of a place. Specifically, Fire Island National Seashore in New York. It is a national park really close to New York City. There's a lot of stories that can go on there, but I think the most interesting, or one of the most interesting things, is that it's the largest populated area in the United States because that doesn't allow cars.
Oh.
So I think.
And where is it?
It's south of Long Island.
Fire Island, you said?
Fire Island, New York.
Fire Island,
yeah.
Fire Island, yeah.
Yes, it's south of New York. It's like interspersed communities that predate the park and national park and state parks. There's lots of issues there about basically these towns have to kind of adapt themselves to live with the island and with nature. They don't allow cars. They set aside portions of the beach for piping plover breeding every year. And I think in general, it could be a really good place to explore that might give other places ideas on how to live better with nature.
Actually, one of my students has a similar thing on Martha's Vineyard, so we can have a couple of island stories here as well.
That's great.
Barrier Island's very important.
That's great. All right, another right there. Why don't you pass the mic back there? There's somebody back there. And I'll come there next. No, I'll go there now, and then we'll come there. Go.
Hi, I'm Anna Lindquist. I'm an Eckerd College grad and a 2019 StoryFest finalist. Yeah. So after graduating from Eckerd, I worked a lot in environmental ed. And so I think one of the really important stories that we have to start talking about is starting the conversations with the younger generation and how to make starting in an environmentally friendly life more, much easier and really less scary, because the conversations that I've been having with middle schoolers and high schoolers is it's really scary once you start learning about all of these terrifying facts and how to start that journey and make it more attractive.
We've had a lot of these conversations. Is how do we don't all perish with eco-anxiety?
Yeah. And we're doing that. We are.
I mean, you have a child, right? So.
I do. I have a 7-year-old. Yeah.
So.
Well, and I think that's the point of the living labs is it's solution based. It's not looking at the problem. It's solution based learning.
And we have proposed more classes and programs where we're actually having college students learning about it, about environmental resilience, energy resilience, and then they are the ones, as people who are actually closer, they are the ones who are then thinking about and going out into the community and communicating it to the younger youth.
I was just going to add, I work for the College of Global Futures, right? So part of the idea is how do you think about the future with positivity, that you don't take it as a given that we're facing, despair in the end of times, but rather, the world is going to exist. What is that world going to look like? What's the world that we want it to look like? How do we actually build a bridge from here to there, right? So that gets you into very different kind of questioning.
Yeah. Go ahead. Let's go quickly because we have just a few minutes left. I want to get as many ideas on the table. Let's go here, and then I'll come to you.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Ron Levine, the founder and president of Oceanites. We actually have a 30-year-old science project in Antarctica counting and monitoring penguin population changes. I would like to encourage something that was said earlier today. For those of us who actually are working on charismatic megafauna, use our animals as the objects of our stories. We are having great success at Oceanites using penguins to tell the stories of climate change and what we should do to adapt to it.
You bet.
They are sending us messages we shouldn't ignore about how the planet is changing. So let's use our animals that we're studying to tell the stories we need to.
Aren't the animals, National Geographic does this a lot, right? Animals work. People care about animals, sadly, sometimes more than people.
Totally, yes, indeed.
It's a good one.
Yes,
Okay.
and I think the local megafauna, I think I had a little difficulty hearing him, but I think when he said local animals, the animals that are close to you make for really good storytelling.
Okay, a couple more. Go ahead.
Cool. So I'm Caitlin Copeland. I'm actually also from Eckerd College. I'm currently a sophomore, and I'm also a Planet Forward correspondent. And so my idea is about aquaculture, because that's like a new emerging agricultural field where they'll farm something such as like oysters. And so I think that would be a really interesting topic to touch on and like kind of just bring more awareness about, because it's also an alternative opportunity for agriculture.
So I agree. Great story, need more awareness. But here's a challenge to you and to everybody. So a lot of these stories have been told, right? So one of the tricks is, what's the unique angle? What's the, right? We still go to Shakespeare, but the plays don't change. But new people come up with new murders and new power play stories all the time. Is there a way in that story? What could we do? Like, where's the creative piece there? The person who's doing something amazing, the unexpected place, what would be the picture or the illustration or the animation that you would use? So just think about that. But I love that. One next to you, okay?
Frank, may I just jump in there?
Quickly, if you could, because we're
Sorry. May I just jump in there on the aquaculture story? And I don't know how it is in the US, but in India, there's a huge equity and justice issue when it comes to aquaculture, because a lot of traditional artisanal fishers are being put out of jobs because of various things that are happening, including climate change. But then the aquaculture gives a chance for people who are not traditional fishers to jump into fishing, and that does not really solve the problem sometimes in terms, and just exacerbates the equity issue. I don't know if that's an angle in the US that you can explore, but that could be a different way to act,
really
to kind of probe that story.
The intersectionality we've talked about
also
too
happens here.
of multiple issues. Yeah, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Hannah Krantz. I'm a junior at GW SMPA. Woo. And I really want to do like a really in-depth profile on a farmer who has their own sustainable, like medium, small-sized farm, because recently for science reporting with Professor Palmer, hi, I've been interviewing a lot of scientists who do research that affects what the farmers do. But I think it's also really important, like you said, we already know that medium and small-sized sustainable farming is the way to feed the world, but I want to know everything that the farmer knows, especially hopefully someone who's been doing it for like decades and can see how climate change has.
So this is a really good idea, and I'll come over
Thanks.
here. This is a really good idea for a couple of reasons. First of all, they're good stories to be told. Again, these stories have been told a lot, so you got to find the interesting angle. We talk a lot about, especially at times of disinformation and distrusted media, of trusted sources, right? So a farmer, someone who's doing a job, someone who's growing food that can show you what's been grown. We have found that farmers are among the trusted sources, the most trusted sources in food stories. People relate to the person who is growing the food. So going to someone like that, doing an interview, finding that story is really important. I mean, think about that in comparison to a lot of people you see talking about food, whether, and no offense, scientists, politicians, God forbid, big ag, executives. But the farmer, that's the person with their hands in the ground. That's a great story, right? And people relate to that level. So that's a great idea. Okay, over here.
Greetings, everyone. I am Ayana King, a sophomore political science major from Tuskegee University. And I think a great idea would be the FAMU houses, such as the new Center for Agroecology, such as the diversity aspect that you guys were talking about, which is headed by Dar Cooper, who is the former leader of the National Black Food Justice Alliance. And I just think—
Give us the name again.
Dar Cooper.
Dar Cooper.
Yes.
And the name of the organization is? National Black, what did you say?
It's the FAMU houses. It's a new center for agroecology.
Okay,
and I think that'd be a great idea.
So why don't we can follow up with you perhaps, Lisa, and get some more on that from you?
Yeah.
Really good idea. All right, all the way over on the side of the room here, and then over here, and then we're going to have to wrap.
Hi, Frank. It's Francesca.
Hi, Francesca.
Hi. I am a GW alum. I just graduated. I was a Story Fest winner last year, and I now work at the World Wildlife Fund. And I wanted to bring up an idea that I think would be really cool to explore more in storytelling, and that's the power of art in engaging public communities on climate awareness and climate engagement. We talk a lot about like creating stories via video, via text, and I think that art is also a really powerful medium. With my work at WWF, we're right now working with sculpture artists and placing sculptures in urban areas and major cities to engage the public. And kind of like a lot of people who live in cities, they're so disengaged from what's happening in nature, what's happening with wildlife. And I think it'd be really cool to do a story on the sculpture team that I'm working on right now, and I think that art is a really powerful way.
All right, we're going to come back to you for that. I was just talking with Sophia Calvi about art. She couldn't help herself. She bought a piece of art from a student that was just that, and we talked about that, and we're going to do it. All right, over here, over there, and go ahead.
My name is Sajal. I was the FAO fellow last summer, but my idea is kind of broad. There's a conception that solutions to the climate crisis and housing crisis in our country are working against each other, and so this story would focus on policy solutions to create sustainable, affordable housing because both need to be addressed in conjunction.
I like that. That's real. If anybody, if you know of some, if anybody knows where we should go to do that story, sustainable, affordable housing. Wow, that would be fabulous.
And I think tied to that, zoning, because that's tied to that issue, is zoning.
Ties to all of these things. It ties to sustainability, it ties to
energy.
Energy is an equity enabler.
Homelessness, all this kind of stuff. Okay, yes?
Hi, I'm Paola Koki. I'm a master's student at the GW School for Public Health, and I'm really interested in climate change and public health. Being from Cameroon in West Africa, I think covering the Lake Chad crisis would be an interesting intersection of conflict, environmental degradation, and health outcomes. So.
Brilliant, brilliant. Do we have a mic over here? Yep.
Hi, I'll be real quick. My name is Colin. I'm with the Office of Sustainability here at GW, also a GW grad. And just being a few miles from the Potomac River, I would love to see more stories coming out about that vibrant ecosystem. A lot of people have never been there or know about it, and it's an incredible ecosystem, very important habitat for a variety of migratory fish species, and I'd love to see more research about it.
Okay, Kim, maybe we do that one next year. That's right here in town. All right, before we wrap, I want to turn to a couple of to our distinguished guests here for just a final thought and kind of where we should go from here. We've talked about a lot today. The problem is huge. The stories are almost infinite. From the scientist's perspective, the engineer's perspective?
Well, I'll tie to that. So I'm going to tie it back to the very beginning. José Andrés said, the heart and the brain. And I thought that was so powerful because I think we see a lot of stories that are just the brain or just the heart, and uniting them together into stories, I think that is very powerful. And so I'd love to see you all doing that, uniting the brain and the heart together to tell a compelling story and reach your audience.
I'm willing to bet that that's the kind of story you want to read your daughter.
Yes.
Right?
She reads to me now.
I hope that's the kind of story she wants to read to you. Arati, thoughts?
I think, given the fickleness of our news cycle and how quickly we tend to forget stories, I would love to see people engage in long-term storytelling. That is, follow a story over time so that, maybe it's in your neighborhood and that's the best thing to choose if you, want to engage with it for a long time. But I'd love to see that, something that's done today or next week or something. What happens to that milieu? What happens to that land, to those people, maybe a year, 2 years down? Because things are constantly changing and we need to document the landscape long term. So I would love to see stories that are followed over time.
Long form and over time. Lisa, you got anybody else online there, or is there anything you would like to add?
I've added the urban planning. We've got the landscape architecture, rain garden, stormwater, pollinators, like the importance of how we work and plan our landscapes to have these areas of interconnections for our habitats. We also know that these are also areas where human populations can come together. We can create community and have the interconnections with each other. We know these are also safer spaces. So this is one area I've covered a lot in my reporting. I've also covered the Lake Chad crisis, and I have ideas if anyone wants to pursue that and how important that is. So all of these I think are terrific.
And you can read Lisa's book, Hot Hungry Planet. Go find it on Amazon and see what she's been doing throughout her career as a science journalist. We come to the end of this. For those of you who are in from out of town and who are interested in going over, we've arranged a guided visit for you to the museum, the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History's climate change exhibit. They're expecting you in another 40 minutes or so. Where should they gather? Out here or just find your way over?
They should just meet us
Okay, so you should have gotten your information, so just meet there. A couple of thanks. I want to thank Patagonia. Patagonia has provided gifts for our Planet Forward winners. You'll be picking that up. Again, Sven, thank you to you for the grand prize. To our production team, thank you all for making this possible today. At Scott Circle and beyond, you rolled in a lot of video, and you brought Arati in from around the world. Arati, thanks for you. What time is it where you in India now?
It's 1 a.m.
Okay, so thank you for all that you do. Thanks to Kim, our fearless leader at Planet Forward. She's our associate director and is just incredible. And thanks to all of you who've come in from out of town, from Arizona, from New York, from Tuskegee, and a gigantic shout out to our soon birthing Indigenous Planet Forward Correspondence Project. Very excited about that. We'll be back. We're going to come back with this. And we talked earlier about making this a movement. This is so much more than just about telling stories. It's about taking what you know and using the tools that you and we have to reach more people, to change some minds. You talked about, what were the two things that you talked about bringing together?
Brain and heart.
I call it, and it's absolutely brain. I think about bringing together intellect and imagination. You combine the intellect and the imagination of what we've got and what we can do. That is a multiplier. That is so powerful. Thank you all very, very much. I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you found this interesting and illuminating. A couple things you can take with it. We should not lose hope. We should not lose hope. What this woman is doing is amazing and will lead to, it will, already has, but it will lead to discovery and progress. And that's what we're doing. And that's what you got to do, because otherwise we really are toast, right? So good luck. Tell more stories. Enjoy the day. Enjoy the exhibit. For those of you who are coming back this evening, you probably know this. We are launching our first Ted Turner event with CNN this evening. CNN will be in this room. Their climate correspondent, Bill Weir, will be here. They will be bringing and having a conversation with Senator Ed Markey. Senator Markey has been one of the lead proponents in the United States Senate for climate change action and activism, and he will be here to be looking at the history of this movement and where it's going to go now, given our fractured political discourse here. For that event, there's a reception at 6, and then the event starts at 7. If you have your name tag, that will be that'll let you in. To go to the reception, you got to be 21 years or older. Sorry, guys. Okay? That has nothing to do with COVID. It has to do with other things. Okay? Am I forgetting anything as we close?
Just have StoryFest winners come up here so we can give them their stuff.
StoryFest winners, come on up. We have a little something for you. Finalists, congratulations again. Have a great day. Enjoy the exhibit, and I hope we'll see you later. Thank you.